Welcome to DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
So do you hear that? Do you hear that noise in the background? I think that's people saying, "Oh my God, it's Ben Stowe!"
And it's good to be back, John. It's good to be back.
Yes.
I appreciate it hanging out, and I appreciate everybody waiting for me to get my life in order so I can come back and do a show. It's been very busy.
It has been a busy fall. Just life gets in the way sometimes of things, and we do what we do. And I think we've got a few weeks we can get some things back here and do a few shows for you guys out there. So first off, if you got questions, those are always something you can send in, and we'll talk about doing some question shows some other time with those. But tonight, Ben, I want to kind of kick off. This is going to be a shorter show because of the Big Daddy show launching this fall. So we're going to be doing these shorter shows. And tonight I have a couple of questions from this past summer that I wanted to ask you. And I just haven't had a chance because even though we live so, literally a few hours apart, we just haven't had a chance to talk and say, hey, Ben, why is this not working?
Well, and I'm currently in Ohio. I'm here at actually one of our loyal viewers and a good friend's place. Was kind enough to loan me his Star Destroyer backdrop and computer to do the show with you tonight. But yeah, it's going to be I think between now and New Year's, I'm going to spend something like 7 days at home total. So I guess this will be like I'll be just appearing from wherever across the country.
Yeah, it's instead of Where's Waldo, it'll be Where's Ben Stowe tonight.
You know what? I finally got my priorities straight, right? I finally got. I'm sorry, viewers. I don't know what came over me doing all those tour shows and stuff. And I finally said, my life is just all out of whack right now. My priorities are totally upside down. I need to come back and do this show. That's priority. I finally got it right. So.
There we are. We'll run with that, and again, be here. So as far as for this fall, if you've got some things you'd like us to cover and talk about, just reach out to either Ben or myself and say, hey, can you guys talk about X, Y, or Z, and we will make that a future show. So, Ben, let's jump into it. I got a couple of questions, and the first one I'm going to jump to is actually let's talk about wireless microphones. This summer I went and I think it was last winter we ended up getting into the RE3 microphones. Michael and I both have those the Electro Voice RE3. And absolutely love them. And this was our really first summer of putting them through the paces, using them for ceremony and using them for these reception things, because I think both systems now have got like 20 some weddings on them throughout the season. So it was a good year for that. My question is that one thing I noticed on those is that there is on the handheld, there's a transmitter level. And I've never experienced that before. So kind of talk a little bit about what that is and what does that mean for me in my applications as a person out there doing sound for a ceremony, as an example.
I want to get just a point of clarity on that. When you say a level, there's both a signal level, as in the amplitude of your voice, and there's a RF transmit power level.
That's what I'm talking. The RF transmit power level, because there was like a low and a high. I think it was two settings.
Yeah, on the RE3, that's 10 milliwatt and 50 milliwatt setting, and I think the obvious answer is that high power is going to give you more power, and what that translates to in the real world is more range. 50 milliwatts going to have a much longer distance, much stronger signal. It's going to go much further or penetrate more through walls and other objects. So that higher power is going to give you much better reception when warranted. And if I had a crystal ball here, and I don't, but if I had a crystal ball, I would bet your next question is going to be, so why is there a low power then? Since why wouldn't we just keep our foot on the gas pedal and go with high power?
You're pretty much right on there. Yeah. We've done a show or two together. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, and it's a predictable question, because I think it's a reasonable question. Well, if high power is better always, why wouldn't I just go with high power? And the answer is because it isn't always better. High power also comes with some consequences. Engineering is always a series of compromises, and particularly if we have multiple systems in use, high channel counts, that high power is going to increase our chances of RF harmonics or intermod. It's going to create more RF noise and make it harder to have multiple systems running. Also, Here's a really interesting situation that I came upon a few years ago, where it happened to happen at a conference, and wasn't responsible for the microphones, but just happened to be the guy who knew what was going on and came in and helped them figure it out. And they had several of these systems set to high power, and then they had that going through an active log periodic antenna, or a batwing, or shark fin antenna, LPA antenna, and the antenna was about 4 feet from the person using the microphone. And they kept having dropouts. And they said, "How is this happening? This is crazy. We're on high power, and we have a high powered antenna with 10 dB boost 4 feet away." And I said, "That's exactly why you have the problem." I said, "You are absolutely hammering the front end of that microphone. It's expecting a certain level, and you are just crushing it right now." So I said, "Watch this." And I set it to low power, and I moved the antenna a little further away, and the dropout stopped. And they said, "That's crazy." I
Wow.
said, "Yeah. Sometimes too much is too much." So I think a general rule of thumb would be, always use low power unless you can't. That if you're having attenuation, if the signal is dropping, you're seeing that meter drop, and you need the high power, then switch to high power. And another way to think about this too would be outdoor situations. Lav packs tend to be worn fairly low. The line of sight is not preserved as well as it would be in a handheld. So it would be very typical for me to run a lav pack in high power and a handheld in low power.
Okay.
So yeah, whenever you can get away with low power, you should. But it's really nice to know on the RE3 and some other systems that have higher RF transmit powers that you can basically blast away. You can go extremely long distances. You can go through more walls and barriers and things. So that is what that setting does for you.
So, in a situation when you were doing sound at the football stadiums and things, where you had a lot of different things going on, would you have utilized these settings and adjusted them, or would it have been one of those things that, or as far as to jump to a higher power, or would the low power have been at the most applicable there?
Low power would have been preferential, because in some cases I had up to 200 channels in use, up to 200 equivalent of a wireless mic. Some of these things were, IFBs and AED locators and other things like that. But basically, I had the equivalent of what would be 200 wireless mics operating. And that's where things like intermod, the RF harmonics, really can become a problem. And particularly before the dawn of these ultralinear systems like EWD, EWDX, ULXD with the low density mode, that sort of thing. So, that was really important to try to have as much stuff operating on low power as possible.
Interesting. You'd think that in a big situation, the more power would be better to try to muscle its way through. But
Well, the problem is, you'd be right. You'd be right. Except the problem is you have 200 things all trying to muscle their way through, and what they're trying to muscle their way through is each other. So now we literally, in the RF realm, we literally call it wargaming when we run these calculations. And so if you kind of think about it, yeah, everybody's trying to outshout everybody in this scenario, in an RF power realm, as it were. And worse is that they're creating all these third, fifth, seventh order harmonics, which, the higher the RF power, the higher the harmonics, right? So we've now created almost an inoperable scenario, so here again, one of those cases where less is more, and certain things maybe would get higher power than others, but there's a bit of prioritization going on.
so you mentioned something about the paddle antenna with that example you were saying at that conference. I would have just kind of defaulted to saying that was just the best antenna situation for pretty much every application, because of it being an external with that, and you'd be able to pick up. I'd be great as outdoor or indoor. I mean, is it a possibility that, like an indoor situation, that would have problems even for personally running one or two microphones, one to the head table and myself? Would that be overkill?
It's possibly overkill, but I don't want to say that and just leave it as that, because I pretty much, almost without exception, use an LPA antenna. However, what I think what we ought to think about here is that we talk about gain staging in audio, and we have something very, very similar in wireless, where the system is designed to accept a certain level of signal, and too little and it doesn't work, and too much and it doesn't work, right? So when we talk about things like adding higher gain antennas, or adding boosters in line, or high power or low power, uh, what we're trying to do is to overcome the loss from distance and also the loss in the length in the cable, which frankly, antenna cable actually has a greater loss than the distance of the radio. So, that's where if we have to run a really long antenna cable, maybe that's why we use boosters, or maybe that's why we use a high gain antenna. Or if our transmit distance is significantly long and we're going to have that attenuation. So, I guess to kind of recap what we said, we shouldn't just cram every boosting device we can think of in the chain, because we're going to end up with a problem. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't use LPAs, the majority of the time, or some type of external antenna. Preserving line of sight is really important. Modern systems are getting less and less powerful because it allows them to navigate the spectrum more efficiently. A lot of systems are, 10 milliwatt, even now down to 1 milliwatt, like, some of these digital systems. So I wouldn't say don't use an LPA, but what I would say is don't use an LPA 4 feet away from your microphone when you're at 50 milliwatts, high power mode. Just sort of think about the balance that we're trying to achieve. Keep an eye on that RF meter on your mic. Obviously more signal is better, to a point. Once the meter's maxed out, we really don't know how much above that we are, right? So,
and you're talking the RF meter on the receiver, not the mic, or would it be on the mic?
No, sorry, the RF meter on the receiver,
Okay.
which is showing you the strength of the radio signal coming in.
Which would actually be more important than, because, typically we're the typical DJs, we grab our microphone and walk around the room, check, 1, 2, yes, I sound good, but I might be not getting as much RF frequency as I would need to have a successful evening.
That is the real challenge, right? If you're walking around with the microphone and, testing it and it's working, but you don't really know how close to not working it might be unless somebody's watching that meter. I was recently doing an install and I was setting up some microphones, and I, just went and carried the microphones, and the rack room was, far away in the building, and we had an antenna cable running through the ceiling, and we did have boosters and things going on to compensate for that antenna cable loss. Anyway, yeah, to go take and set the microphones over there, go back to the rack room and look and see what it looked like. But of course, we don't have the added factor of, a bunch of giant walking bags of salt water, which is humans. One of the really cool systems out there, when you say that, it reminds me, Audio-Technica's 3000 series 4th gen system actually has I forget what they call it, but it's a mic check basically in their software. You have to use their software, but you connect to it, and timed walk around or something like that. Anyway, you just basically say, hey, I want you to monitor my signal for the next 5 minutes or whatever. And then you go off and do your thing, and you come back and it'll show you a chart.
Oh, nice.
It's really a pretty cool feature. Yeah. I wish more companies did that, but yeah, kudos to Audio-Technica for doing that.
Yeah. They've had a couple of things we've talked about on the shows that some technology you've been really, really impressed with. You mentioned the antenna wire. When you're talking,
it's root beer, by the way, just in case you wondered. So. Everybody's like, well, Ben's has got a lot cooler. He's drinking on the show. No, that's your job, viewers. Remember, every time I say it depends, you take a drink.
And so far, they've been pretty dry and parched. But now,
yeah, sorry. All right, we got one coming up.
Antenna wire. You mentioned that. Let's talk a little bit about that. You said long run.
Good.
Define long run for me, because when I'm visualizing our audio XLR cables, when we talk long run, that's a substantial distance.
Yeah, it's a much shorter distance when we start talking about antenna cable. I don't really like to get my antenna cables over maybe 25 or 50 feet. It depends on the type of cable I'm using. There's a lot of different types of antenna cable, and off the top of my head, I'll probably miss one here, but we've got RG58, we've got RG8, RG8, U, RG213, and there's all these different types that have different characteristics. And I actually have a spreadsheet I built to calculate loss. So if you ever want to know, you can just ping me and say, hey, I'm looking to go this far, blah, blah, blah. But here's the deal. The signal loss going from 50 feet on your radio is not that significant, but the signal loss going 50 feet on the antenna cable really is.
Wow.
So it doesn't really benefit you to run 100 feet of antenna cable. What benefits you is to have, better RF management, good line of sight, those kinds of things are going to pay more dividends in terms of more reliable signal than running lots and lots of antenna cable. Because to go 100 feet, that's not very lossy. We're looking at like some really thick, heavy, expensive cable.
Hmm.
Actually, let me just see if I can. I have my trusty dusty laptop on my friend's desk here. Let me just punch this up real quick, and I'll pull up my calculator, and I'll just tell you the difference. I'm sorry, viewers, I don't have it memorized. I know, I know. I feel like I just let everybody
Yeah,
down.
you were so close, and then you know, admitted to being human and
I'll tell you, this
not
just
having.
more gray in the beard every day. So, let me pull up my little calculator. And, all right, antenna cable loss calculator.
Trevor, I think wireless mics have cost me several years of my life, and probably
Yeah,
Trevor, some of that gray hair on Ben's chin. That probably,
we all feel it, So a short, funny story about it. Here's my fancy calculator. You see how really involved that is. It's not very
woo.
involved. It was just what I needed, But I'll tell a short story before we punch in some numbers. So a friend of mine used to do the wireless coordination for the Super Bowl for many years. I don't know how many amounts to, but anyway, he said, "Hey Ben," he said, "You want to do wireless for the Super Bowl?" And I didn't even think twice. I said, "Absolutely, yes, I do." And then immediately after I said yes, I kind of had that moment of clarity, right? Where I was like, wait a
What?
minute, why aren't you doing it anymore? you know? And he goes, man, I just can't handle it anymore. He said, it's just too much. And I thought, I'm still in, I'll do it. One time, right? And and so I ended up on the list, but I never did. I was never the first guy, right? I guess I was like the backup's backup or whatever. But after doing 9 college football Division I national championship games, which is not the Super Bowl, but it's still a significant enough event, with millions of viewers and whatever, uh, I know why he quit. I'm 9-0 and I'm retired. It's just at some point you go, sooner or later I'm going to lose this game.
Mm.
And in the meantime I'm losing years off my life. So it's like, what? It's if I go 10-0, 11-0, what's the difference, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Right? You've got 9 under my belt and they all went great, and I'm calling it done there. So, all right. So just for the sake of fun, let's take a look here. So I've got 25 feet of cable length, and with RG58, this is loss in dB. Now,
Okay.
again, a lot of our really smart people that watch the show say, "Hey, dBs is what measures sound in too." Yeah, so similar but different, but just follow along here, right? So 3 dB is half, right? Half the power. Or double, whatever, depending on how we're going here. So a 25-foot cable has about a 2.5 dB loss at RG58. And now all RG58 is not created equal. So this is just sort of a generalized benchmark, right? It's going to be close, okay? So 2.5 for RG58, 2.4 for RG8X. So marginal difference, only 1.4 for RG213. And then 0.8 for RG8, which is different from RG8X. That's very important because obviously there's a big difference between 2.4 and 0.8 between those two. The only difference in the name is one letter. And again, you might say, oh, well, so I should just probably get RG8, all the time, or I should get RG213. No, not necessarily. Again, if for most of our purposes, a 3 dB loss is, well, that might be half the power. It's not all that significant in the grand scheme of things. It is lossy, but it's not the end of the world, right? If you look at your meters on your mic, you say, gosh, that's, there's a lot of dBs in there, right? Where that would be a real problem is if we, it would be a real problem if my spreadsheet locked up. There it goes. All right. So thanks, Microsoft. Make me look bad in front of my friends. Anyway, so if I change that to 100 feet, now my RG8 has a 3 dB loss, which I can live with. But my RG58 and my RG8X are right around 10 dB.
Okay.
Which is
substantial.
something I don't want to live with that. So I'm not going 100 feet on RG58.
Okay, so you had mentioned boosters. Does that fit into the equation to rectify or to assist in fixing that a bit?
Absolutely, sure. You could get a 9 dB booster and you're basically back at 0. You're basically back at square one, right? And some of these active antennas have built-in boosters and they have selectable. And here again, you say, why is it selectable? Why don't we just go all the way to the floor with the gas pedal? Because we don't want to overload the front end of our radios. So it's about trying to keep things at, and I'll use an audio term, unity, right?
Sure.
And I'm saying that for illustrative purposes. It's about trying to keep it where it wants to be. So these radios are designed to operate a little bit less than 100% signal. That's just common sense. They know that they're not going to have full signal all the time. But when we completely overload the front of that radio, then we have some problems.
So does it matter? I've seen some systems that have multiple of the fin type of antennas in use, and sometimes only a single one. Does that really matter? Or what was I seeing?
That's what I'm wondering. Because almost all modern radios today are a diversity type system, whether it's true diversity or antenna diversity or some other type of diversity system, which requires two antennas. Possibly what you saw is there's a single antenna with two monopoles sticking out the sides of it called a D fin. And so we still have two connections to that, or you could run one paddle antenna and then just one other regular antenna, and you're clearly going to have the paddle is almost always going to be the better path, so the radio is probably going to lean on that more than anything, but you still have two antennas, so you still have an alternate antenna path, and you still have preserved your diversity. But the moral of the story here, I think, is that you really want two antennas. And to coin a phrase, I would say one paddle is better than no paddles, and two paddles is better than one paddle.
And would you set those up then at a distance? You mentioned, of course, putting them 4 feet from you, not advisable. Would you set them to the sides? Would they be
4 feet from the microphone?
Or 4 feet from the microphone.
4 feet from you is fine, and 4 feet from where the microphone is, that's probably a little bit hot.
A little bit hot, yeah. But how would you go about setting those up? Would they be set up, both on one side of the room, one in that corner, one in that corner? How are they located?
Typically, I would just keep them close to home base, as it were, right? Close to me, where I'm at, with or close to the side of the stage or something, and have them, a foot or two apart from each other this way, just to allow for a couple different radio paths to those antennas. And they're directional, so kind of point them in the direction your mics are going to be being used. Now, bottoms up, everybody, because it depends. If you've got thank you, it's your gratuitous.
You got it.
Delicious root beer. We need to get this company to sponsor us. All right. So, anyway, if you were in like a long, narrow room, maybe we would have one pointing each direction, because it's better to have coverage going each way than it is to have really good coverage going one way.
Sure.
So, and again, it does depend, right? But as a rule, these antennas are directional, and we should point them where the microphones are going to be being used.
And as you said, they could be on the stands a foot or two apart, aimed towards the sweet spot, in essence, of the stage. And you would have...
Or they could be on separate stands, and they could be one over here and one over here. But again, that's situational to where are the people that are talking on your microphones going to be.
Sure. Well, there we go. Some good information.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That we actually
really bad after taking a long hiatus. If I came back and the show was terrible.
Yeah, that was good. We for those wondering, we did have a couple of other questions that were going to be we were going to throw out here in our 25 minutes tonight, but this was good. Hopefully we were able to get some information that you guys can say, wow, I did not know that. Because there was a few things.
And as always, we've got some really smart people that work with me at NLFX, some great coworkers. We're always happy to help. Feel free to reach out to me personally, reach out to a coworker. So if those questions come up, obviously we love to have them on the show and we love to answer them. But if they come up in an application scenario where you're like, look, I can't wait for the next show, I need to get something figured out here, that's what we're here for. So just drop us a line.
Yep. And then if it's a really good question, then we'll probably still do another show on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. John really does the majority of the work for this show. He does a great job of fielding your questions and doing that. But those questions, when they come to me, every now and then I'm like, John, this is a great question. Somebody just asked me a great question, and I think we should talk about it on the show.
Exactly, and that's where some of the best ones come from. I'm going to put the link for the next show. Will be coming up here in about 4 minutes. Brian and Jay and Howie and John and the crew are going to be in the chill room tonight.
Howie's birthday, boy.
That's right.
A couple days ago. Kind of lost track of time traveling here, but anyway, I know it was recently.
So, so Howie, this is Howie's birthday week. We'll call it that. And now
That's right.
we got it covered. But yeah, they're going to be talking music on Tuesday night. And Brian had some new albums he found somewhere. He had some vinyl, I think, on an estate sale. So he's going to be bringing that. And there's some always interesting things when he goes digging. Create.
I need to call him. I haven't had time, but yeah, I need to call him and ask him what he thinks about the fact that the Beatles released a new song in 2023.
Now that's an interesting, and I'm sure the guys will talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a whole that's way of but anyway.
It's something. I watched the video and listened to the song, and some people have talked about how impressive the video edit was and how they put that together, and it's definitely something pretty cool. I mean, it's not quite as good as sock puppets when I'm reacting, but
a lot of nostalgia there, and I thought it was cool that John and Ringo were in the video, and I mean Paul and Ringo, sorry, but of course John and George were in there too, and I mean, I think people are going to find stuff they don't like about it, and people are going to find stuff they like about it. I think it's going to be what you make of it, what it means to you. But I thought, this is pretty phenomenal, and I know we could talk about it. This is a topic we don't have time for it. I know we're out of time, but the AI was described as somebody, with what John did on the piano and his vocals. It's sort of like if somebody gave you a cake, and then the AI was able to turn that cake back into all the raw ingredients and give it back to you. It's just pretty wild, pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, it's incredible what the technology can do. That it is.
Anyway.
Thank you guys for being with us tonight. Again, in a couple of minutes, DJNTV.com/chill. Head out there, and if you have any questions, the link, NLFX link, is down below in the description of the video. You can go there and get a phone number and ask questions, or reach out online. They're there to help. So, Ben, thank you much, and let's see what next week looks like. Next Tuesday night, it'll be at the 9:30 Eastern time once again. So we'll catch you then, gang. Good night, everybody.